We've got to curb her trips to the dump. And where's she getting the hair to play dress up with him?
Holy heck, a human haunted mansion harbors hair lore, horrific cues, romantic hands, and a house that holds no high hopes for a happy hypothesis about his home? Welcome to episode 2 of Mr. This Guy's analysis of murder drones. I don't know about you, but I certainly did not expect a flashback in episode 2. But since we have it, eye color just became a fascinating feature. I waited until this episode to talk about it, but our definitely meaningless 3-arrow symbol appears in yellow whenever it glitches, the same color as the murder drone's eyes. However, we now know from the flashback that N, J, and V's eyes used to be white. There was only one drone in the flashback with yellow eyes. So maybe you could say that they were related or something, but I'd still stake my life on all this absolute solver and weird symbol stuff being meaningless.
That's weird and concerning.
Didn't you just hear me? I said it's meaningless, V! Side note, I love the choice to have the humans all black with white eyes. It looks really cool, it shows them as these surreal, otherworldly beings, and highlights that this is a show about drones, not the people. Plus, the visual details of using the lightning to change scenes is epic. Also, N sleeps like a bat just in case you need any more confirmations that they were made to resemble vampires. To start us off, this flashback establishes that the murder drones N, V, and J were not always murder drones. They were not only worker drones, but they weren't officially made.
We've got to curb her trips to the dump.
This Tessa has been rebuilding drones that were thrown out to work in the mansion. N and J seem to somewhat be their usual selves, but V seems a lot more hesitant and even like she would have a crush on N. A strange twist from what he proclaimed to Uzi in the first episode. More than that, though, it shows that there might be some value in V's personality, on the inside.
Wanna do an autopsy to find out?
Deep, deep inside. This memory dream of N's gets even more interesting when we learn that someone...
reformatted your memories to soup.
When N checks his hand, this is the realization he's having. He doesn't share it, and maybe the railgun knocks something loose in his head so he starts having access to these memories again. But setting up that they don't remember how they got here and that they weren't always this way is actually a great detail for something we'll come back to at the end of the episode. Also, they are really trying to get us to like you this episode, huh, V? It's not enough they had to be shaped like an hourglass with a head, you had to cutely play with bubbles, too. Do they have taste?
Who programmed that?
Then there's the plot. We get some serious lore implications from this relay Jay was supposedly getting orders from, and the possibility that it isn't connected to the company. Then, when Uzi mentions the humans are past negotiating, V says,
Or we missed the negotiations. The humans programmed us to solve a problem. Where's proof of your backstory? The one where you're kind so conveniently innocent.
this has the potential to make a lot of sense. Surely worker drones minding their own business wouldn't be that big of a problem. The humans might even be able to send more people to resume operations with just a bit of protective gear, just to get the drones working again. But worker drones that caused an extinction event? That's a very different story, and would certainly justify sending drones to kill them without any attempt at communication. Additionally, I find it interesting that this idea would come from V. She's been chained up, and antagonizing them certainly isn't going to get them to trust her anytime soon. She can't even just say this idea, she has to get all up in Uzi's face about it like she's trying to make it bother her as much as possible. And this goes right back to her nice sit with her bubble blowers and annoyed expression. We didn't get much about V as a character in episode 1, but I had a really hard time trying to read her at first here. She acts annoyed most of the time, but she's quick to make belittling comments or even act aggressive whenever she isn't part of the picture, and shows restlessness in blowing bubbles and later just licking the stick. Plus, while we're on the subject, her expression softens when N won't react to her comments, and she doesn't try to leave when she realizes she isn't even tied down anymore. Keeping in mind that I've seen the other episodes and I'm trying to make a read just on what we've seen at this point, I think it's still fair to say that I don't believe her when she says,
I still feel nothing.
while there's certainly an element of carelessness to the way she acts, a lot of it looks like an act, specifically trying to avoid care. Perhaps she doesn't feel towards worker drones, but she blushed towards N once upon a time. Rather than truly unfeeling, every time she seems careless, talking to herself loud, blowing bubbles during serious conversation, denying knowing N's name when she obviously does, or making these belittling comments, It looks very intentional. We even see that she stops trying to put up this act to others when N is actually struggling. In a way, she seems a lot like N, trying to believe something to feel safer and more in control, but instead of choosing to feel like everything's okay, she's decided not to feel anything at all. Or at least, that's what she's trying to do. But that's enough characterization. Let's get back to the true surprise of this episode. I don't know about you, but after watching the first episode, I did not expect this to be a horror show, even with as gory as it was. The dim, foreboding atmosphere, scary humanoid creatures, apocalyptic world, and mountain of corpses were there, but it was still mostly just joking violence.
Not wait until my loving wife and kids hear about this.
With the occasional oily gore. Then we get this, and I realized instantly that some actual horror was about to happen. Firstly, a character struggling with autonomy is a pretty safe blanket method for establishing empathy. But then they made a point about leaving him in the dark. I knew for a fact at this point that Frank's oil was about to be spilled, but nothing could have prepared me for the monster that was actually going to appear in this episode. Behold, the clearly very organic ribcage. This was such an amazing way to establish the first instance of true horror in the series. This is something I know will come up later, but there's a lot to be said for the fact that oil doesn't trigger the same response as blood, even in a clearly animated show like this, and that the death of robots just doesn't hit like the death of a person on screen. And even then, death on screen is something most people are numb to at this point because of how much it's used in just about everything. Understandably. This show knew how to make the first instance of real horror hit. What they did with Frank, just showed how capable they are of humanizing a character to get us to care about them before they're killed. But they also lured us into a kind of false sense of security. Obviously, something more has to happen because you're watching the episode, but the only threat we knew from the first episode had been neutralized, and despite being extremely dangerous, they weren't all that horrifying. You can imagine how frightening it might be for an abnormally tall human to grow claws and wings out of flesh at will, but it's pretty tame as a robot. Whatever dangers I was thinking might be presented on a first watch were somewhat based in the same ideas. Maybe V would break free, or the humans would send more murder drones who would get through that hole in the ceiling. I hadn't even begun to think about a new kind of threat, much less a half-flesh, half-metal chestburster of the dead vampire with the power of being insane. That is to say, writing on walls. All that to say, they hit their first moment of real horror hard.
Of course, M&Ms.
So we've got stereotypical cool guy, again establishing himself as a great friend. But do you know what this means? The robots aren't built with their hair according to what we learned from the flashback. Tessa was adding it to them. Since there's no hair poking out anywhere else, Thad might actually just have a single tuft of hair tucked into the front of his hat to produce this effect. Now I feel the need to establish that I love this scene. I said in the first episode that Murder Drones does a great job of picking its style of comedy and sticking to it, but it has a lot of other consistent styles and moments that can signal you in on certain things. Firstly, Murder Drones will do this thing when something suspicious comes up, and drones will look at it a while, ominously, while a certain sound plays, only to suddenly become comically willing to walk into whatever obvious horror trap is in front of them.
Yes? Hi.
We'll see even more of it in later episodes, but we see this again just a couple scenes later when Lizzie sees herself on the other side of a door.
That girl is gorgeous, right? I'm gonna let her in.
Additionally, along with being the first real horror gore moment in the series, this really sets up that this creature is perfect for the horror comedy genre. This thing isn't just strong and gluttonous, it has powers of illusion, albeit bad ones for now, and is insane enough to make its illusions sit around and complement itself.
Improv game for more practice?
We are a monster.
It called itself me and we in the same conversation. With itself. There's not even a POV for that. It was using first person, but in the context of other people. Which was also itself, so I don't know how this works anymore. Then there's this, and A, has it lured that many people into this trap already to know all of these holograms? B, the cup disappearing from her hand was hilarious. But C, was anyone else disappointed that her sunglasses weren't also an illusion? Now, you saw the thumbnail. I called this The Haunting. What I think is one of Murder Drone's most prominent artistic details across the episodes is that each episode is its own brand of horror. In the first one we had the classic Don't Let It In style, and in this one there's a bit of two. Firstly, the sentient facility, a creature so big and far-reaching it seems unfightable because it reaches asymmetrically through the entirety of the structure it inhabits.
Sorry, industrial strength ghost or whatever. Settle.
Secondly, it acts a lot like a ghost in the way it haunts a location and waits for its victims. Classic to ghost-type horror, it rarely shows its face and instead prefers to play with its victim with some kind of mysterious power. For the Absolute Solver, this is illusions and trickery, but also psychological attacks. We'll see even more of these themes portrayed in later episodes, but until then, I just think this is worth a quick mention. But after watching a lot of comedic shows recently, I realized this is actually a common trope for the genre. It makes absolutely no sense for N to be let inside, so they make a joke out of how easy it is. If you have a comedic story, you really don't have to take a lot of plot holes seriously because you can get around them with humor. But it also just really makes me respect how serious and funny the show can be at the same time. Then we get this bit of lore.
Hey, isn't that your special eye?
Shut up, N, I'm trying to make a joke about it not meaning anything. Is that recording for that? This establishes a lot of things. The meaninglessness of the Absolute Solver and the 3-arrow symbol are connected. It has something to do with how murder drones reconstruct themselves, the Absolute Solver is a program, and it isn't just hunting to hunt. It wants materials. And what's more, this program has its own sentience, separate from the drone it resides in.
Jay's not here. We are trying to repair that host as per our directive.
So you are a program?
Also, we learn that it's creepy as creep. What's weird is that it just needs to repair one drone, but it goes through the effort of becoming an enormous centipede. I don't have a great answer as to why, but I imagine whatever it takes for basic motor functions is different from personality and more precise technical elements. If it just needed metal, the walls are built of that, but it keeps going after drones, and a lot of them. As we see later, she doesn't have her eye lights or a proper jaw, so these are probably the types of parts she can only get from drones. Though I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on why she needs so many. I almost wonder if the program keeps using up the parts to make all those camera eyes and then turning around to be like, oh man, I still need more of those parts to make the eyes. And just gets stuck in an ignorant loop of making more cameras like that. So we get all this about a teamwork shuriken, however that worked. The most serious point of plot armor that I've ever seen, seriously, how is this guy alive? And still trying to be nice and act positive.
Why do you look so...
Great! You look great, Jay.
And the infamous
Mom hologram?
This is interesting to me because it gives us a solid case for who killed Uzi's mom. So far, the robot has only been able to make illusions of people it has seen. To make an illusion of Uzi's mom, we know it's accurate because Uzi recognizes her, it must have seen her. From what we saw in the first episode, we know the murder drones mostly hunt alone, and I highly doubt Khan would have had time to put his wife out of her misery and get away if there were more than one murder drone at the scene. Conclusion, Jay killed Uzi's mom, and once the Absolute Solver is active, it can access the host's memories. I make such a big deal out of this because I usually hear that N killed Uzi's mom, and I just haven't seen any proof of that. Also, N was apparently bad at his job, so the likelihood that he would have been the one to do it is low. This also shows us a little bit about heredity. For one, I believe eye color is hereditary based on gender. Girls get their moms and boys get their dads and all that. But it also shows us that the entirely meaningless symbol in your eye and whatever comes with it is also hereditary. The rest of the battle happens as Uzi is tricked into giving the railgun to the solver, while N is up in the rafters trying to figure out how to cut arms off. He saves her, and the railgun blows up, leaving a strange little black hole behind, which floats away ominously. Then, the crab we saw earlier, and it too drops a little black hole. From what I can tell, there is a lot of disagreement and confusion about what is happening here and why there are two cores. Now clearly these cores seem unique to the murder drones and are strange in more ways than just including flesh. But if this core of J's contained her memories and this program, why would there be two? The first drops from the camera eye, and you could maybe say it was whatever sentient force took over J. But the second one, the crab that we actually saw climb out of Jay's body, speaks in the same voice as the camera eyes did.
Sneaky, sneaky, sneaking away. Get snuck upon.
Trying not to spoil, but the second black hole consciousness doesn't even make sense to come up anywhere else in the series. But I have a theory. Obviously, I don't know how the science actually works because it doesn't exist.
Yet? It doesn't work yet. Who said it doesn't work? Maybe it does.
Obviously, these souls, these cores, look like black holes, and if you know anything about black holes, they can hold pretty much an infinite amount of matter within zero space. And I would think that this absolute solver, if its whole thing is collecting matter, would have a way to easily integrate, store, and redistribute it. It doesn't even make sense that it would be able to make flesh or these complicated things, but maybe if it can simplify everything down to atoms by storing them in its core, then it can redistribute it pretty much however it wants. Hence, my theory that there is only one core in this room. It even looks like the core is taking in the matter from what's left of it when it collapses. I think the cores still need some kind of form to move around with any kind of efficiency, and maybe they even need a form to consume additional matter. Rather than two cores, I think this is the same core having built a body for itself in an instant, and it only leaves in its simplest form when it realizes they aren't going to let it get away in any other form. But let's talk about Uzi flinching away from N, and instead running back to Khan. In the parent-teacher conferences, we see how Khan avoids the fact that Uzi is lonely at all costs. He calls her popular and supernatural. And when the teacher says,
"Yeah, she has trouble fitting in. We think there might be something damaged with her programming."
Khan just focuses on the fact that he called her damaged, even going to himself not spending much time with her over addressing that she has no friends in school.
Several people wanted to, for the record. No, he didn't. You freak us out.
We still know he does care about her.
Call her damaged again, and I will install a door on your face!
But he's not willing to actually help her through her problems and is perfectly willing to downplay his betrayal in episode 1.
I left her for dead once!
But of course, Uzi doesn't see any of that. Ironically, she doesn't see enough of her dad to know how bad he is for her. But once again, she's left with no other options.
What are you things?
This goes back to the setup at the beginning, where he's realizing after the dream that he wasn't always this deadly vampire. This fear of N is especially sad when you take into account all of the you goods of this episode.
You good, Uzi?
I'm good. Better than good. I am God!
You good?
I'm good. Stop asking.
You good?
Ugh, stop asking!
N was all about making sure she was okay, but then Uzi actually gets traumatized by whatever J was.
You good?
No!
Pranked, idiot. You big stupid.
She finally admits in the face of this thing that she wasn't good, and N wasn't even there. After all the illusions, she doesn't know what to trust, but she understands that there's potential for that same creature in N. He wants to protect people, but if Uzi doesn't feel safe around him, the only choice he sees is to leave. Meanwhile, she learned that she still does care about her dad when she thought he had died. So she goes back to him. This is a really well executed Pyrrhic victory. Despite killing Jay, Uzi and N don't feel comfortable around each other anymore, and Uzi goes right back to the person we know isn't right to take care of her. Despite the success, this episode ends in absolute tragedy for just about everyone but Khan. Then of course, there's the introduction of this red-eyed character. Her name isn't said in this episode, though you could snatch Doll from the credits if you really wanted. And I had no idea her name was Doll until like episode 6, because at first I thought Doll was just a cutesy nickname. Regardless, she establishes that she speaks Russian for some reason, and that her parents are dead. Also, that she's a bit more competent than the average insert stereotypical white girl's name here. And she's got superpowers to make doors meaningless. Just kidding. But since we know now that she has the same symbol as Uzi, it's possible that Uzi also has the same power of making doors meaningless. More than that though, if the power is truly hereditary, then one of Doll's parents likely had the same thing too. Meaning this meaningless symbol might be a lot more common than we thought with Uzi. What's especially weird though is that this symbol seemed to have a connection to the Absolute Solver. But the solver only used illusions and its ability to make itself larger, never the ability to make doors meaningless. Oh, and making bugs meaningless too, I guess. Then we get this photo. I had no idea who this was on my first watch, but it is clearly V, something Glitch tried to help us with by the fact that she takes up the screen in place of it. An excellent detail Glitch's animation/storyboard team. Me and my friends are just too stupid to notice. Doll clearly has an interest in V, but also seems a little crazy with her consumption of bug blood. Then, to top it off, we do see that Uzi is not done with all this. She isn't someone who's just going to try to forget this horrifying thing. She's never been one to wait and ignore a problem, and she's fitting her character perfectly by hanging these horrifying hand-drawn images above her bed, where she can never, ever, ever forget about them. This is a good way to get nightmares, Uzi. Why would you draw these things? And why would you hang them on your ceiling above your bed? It seems like a really inconvenient spot to put them, Uzi. It cannot be easy to put things up there, especially into a metal roof, Uzi. What could have possessed you to make this choice, Uzi? Anyhow, the animators clearly love writing these things because they say a lot of fun things, like, "Holy snake crab! Trust no one. That's why I don't have any friends." No the reason. "This is stupid and also Oh, I'm so glad you also realized pinning nightmare creatures to the metal ceiling above your bed was a terrible idea. Why did you still do it and also pin this up there?" Anyway, that's all I have on episode 2. There'll be plenty, especially about Doll, in the next episode, not to mention my second favorite fight scene from this series. Remember to subscribe and comment if you've got the time to do so. I really appreciate any feedback in the comments, as this is still only my second real video. Till we meet again, this is Mr. This Guy, signing off. I'd give you a promise on when my next video will be out, but I honestly don't know. I'm very validation motivated, so expect I'll get it out quicker if this one is well received and you communicate that it was well received. And so much for each video being about as long as the episode, huh?